of Aurora, Illinois. Authorities say the suspect has been apprehended or neutralized, in their words. We're awaiting a news conference there. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin is live tonight in Aurora. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Brett. And a spokesman for the Kane County Coroner's Office says that one person has been killed throughout this incident. We heard from the spokesman for the city of Aurora, Clayton Muhammad. He says that the shooter in this case has been neutralized. There are numerous reports out there that say the word neutralized means that the shooter indeed has been killed. We know that 4 police officers were injured throughout the course of this. We don't know the extent of their injuries. We have been told that those injuries are not life-threatening. An unknown number of civilians were injured in this shooting. They have been taken to Mercy Medical Center and the Rush Copley Medical Center. We know that the Rush Copley Medical Center has taken in 2 individuals, their injuries said to be not life-threatening. What we have, really through local media who interviewed people, witnesses from the scene, is information that the shooter is someone who worked at this Henry Pratt facility, and he worked in assembly. What set him off, that is unknown. We are waiting for the first briefing from the Aurora City Police Chief, Christian Zeman. That briefing has been delayed by a half hour, and that's because the newly elected governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, he wanted to be part of it, and it simply just takes a long time to get here from the city of Chicago. Brett.
All right, Mike, when that news conference happens, we will bring it to you live here on Fox. Thank you. Meantime, President Trump says he is declaring a national emergency to build a border wall because of what he calls an invasion from the south. The president made that declaration official this morning. The president conceding he will be sued, but is predicting success eventually. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the story tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. White House officials tell Fox News that attorneys spent weeks going through all of the ins and outs of an emergency declaration to make sure that the president would be on solid ground today. Still, he stirred up a hornet's nest. With a stroke of his executive pen, President Trump today invited what may be the biggest challenge to his executive power yet.
We're talking about an invasion of our country with drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs.
In total, President Trump is looking at $8 billion to build his border wall, $1.37 billion from the DHS appropriation, $601 million from the Treasury Department's forfeiture fund, $2.5 billion from the Pentagon's drug interdiction program, including $2.2 billion that will be reprogrammed from other areas of the Pentagon, and $3.6 billion from the military construction budget. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi ripped the president for raiding the Pentagon budget to build a wall, in a joint statement saying the president's unlawful declaration over a crisis that does not exist does great violence to our Constitution and makes America less safe, stealing from urgently needed defense funds for the security of our military and our nation. The president today insisted moving the money would not hurt the military.
We had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important.
In making his case, President Trump today pointed to dozens of emergency declarations that never drew the type of fire he's receiving. But those declarations weren't used as a way to go around Congress on appropriations. The president also gave his critics more ammunition today when he seemed to indicate the emergency declaration wasn't necessary.
I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall.
Socialist firebrand Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said she'd introduce legislation to block the president, tweeting, "Joaquin Castro, Texas, and I aren't going to let the president declare a fake national emergency without a fight." A congressional fight may be the least of the president's worries. White House officials, even the president, openly acknowledge their attempt to reprogram military money will land them in court.
They will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
The words had barely escaped the president's lips when the ACLU announced that it would sue the president. And Democrats on the House Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee, today sent a letter to the White House saying that they wanted to investigate the president's emergency declaration and asked the White House to make officials from both here and the Department of Justice available for the hearings. Brett?
More on this with the panel. John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. As we told you earlier, the president says the situation on the southern border is an invasion. His critics say it's a made-up emergency. Tonight, correspondent Casey Stiegel shows us what's happening at one major crossing, and you can decide for yourself.
Here in Eagle Pass, Texas, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials face the arduous task of processing each caravan migrant, which involves feeding them and then conducting a credible fear interview to see if they qualify for asylum in the U.S. If they do, they're sent to a U.S. detention facility to formally begin the process in immigration court.
At this point, the system is at a total capacity at all points in the process.
Today, the S&P 500 finished ahead 30. The Nasdaq was up 45. For the week, the Dow was up 3 1/3 percentage points. The S&P 500 gained 2.6. The Nasdaq finished ahead almost 3. Now, one of the reasons experts saw for today's market surge was China. President Trump says whatever trade deal he makes with that country will be second-guessed by his critics, so he has an unusual plan to address that. Tonight, correspondent Kevin Corke takes a look at how the negotiations are progressing and what the future may hold.
There is a possibility that I will extend the date. And if I do that, if I see that we're close to a deal or the deal is going in the right direction, I would do that at the same tariffs that we're charging now.
From Washington to Beijing, all the way to the corner of Wall and Broad, the president's announcement today that he might delay increasing tariffs on Chinese goods if ongoing trade talks continue to progress was met with great optimism, a reflection perhaps of both the pace of the talks and the size of the deal.
I guess you could say must be the biggest deal ever made if you think trade with China. How big does that get?
But time is running out. The president's threatened to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods if a deal can't be struck by March 1st. That's on top of the more than $250 billion in tariffs already imposed.
We're going to be leveling the playing field. The tariffs are hurting China very badly. Right now, China is paying us billions of dollars a year in tariffs, and I haven't even started.
But trade talks have started, and they've led to progress between the two parties, according to the White House, something China's president hopes will continue.
I think that so far, the trade teams from both countries are working towards this road of consensus.
But among experts, there's still a healthy amount of skepticism when it comes to dealing with Beijing.
The real issue here is whether you can craft an arrangement that stops the Chinese from stealing hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property each year, whether you can craft an arrangement that stops them from other predatory trade practices. That's pretty unlikely.
The president, Brett, also said he would welcome input from a pretty unlikely source, offering to welcome Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi in toward the end of any negotiations to share their thoughts on a possible deal. Brett?
Kevin Corke of the White House briefing room. Kevin, thanks. A former top FBI official seems to be changing his story regarding an attempt to remove President Trump from office. The lawyer for fired Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, says statements about an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment are being taken out of context and misrepresented. He says McCabe was present when the subject was brought up by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, but McCabe did not participate in, quote, extended discussions about it. Also tonight, a federal judge has issued a partial gag order in the criminal case of longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone. He's charged with lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering related to material stolen from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Stone has pleaded not guilty. The U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether the 2020 census can include a question about citizenship that could affect the allocation of seats in the House of Representatives and the distribution of billions of dollars in federal money. The justices have agreed to a speedy review of a lower court ruling that has so far blocked the administration from adding the citizenship question to the census for the first time since 1950. Police in Chicago say 2 men have been arrested in the investigation into an alleged assault on an actor. Jesse Smollett of the Fox TV show Empire says he was beaten by men shouting racial and homophobic slurs, one of whom said, quote, "This is MAGA country," referring to the president's Make America Great slogan. Great Again slogan. Police say the suspects, who are also black, were arrested for probable cause of committing the assault, but had not been charged as of this afternoon. One of them, according to police, worked on the set of Empire, and sources say they were friends of Smollett. That is all adding up to the growing suspicions by some in Chicago that Smollett may have fabricated the story. The U.S. is ratcheting up the economic and political pressure on Venezuela, with new sanctions announced today targeting 5 individuals from the Maduro regime. As that country hangs on the brink of civil war, National Security Advisor John Bolton speaks to correspondent Jillian Turner about the Trump team's game plan to oust Nicolas Maduro.
There's a lot at stake here. We're supporting this popular movement in Venezuela.
In an exclusive interview with Fox News, President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, says time's up for disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
I can tell you, among the key generals, the leading figures supporting Maduro, they're in constant conversation with the opposition. The press doesn't see this. It's not on the surface, but they're negotiating.
Clinging to power in Caracas, Maduro is firing warning shots at the Trump administration.
The infected hand of Donald Trump is hurting Venezuela. Hands off of Venezuela, Donald Trump, and Venezuela will flourish.
As millions of Venezuelans stare down the mouth of civil war and a mass-scale humanitarian crisis, Maduro insists it's President Trump's advisors who are the problem.
Venezuela has 2,000 generals. That is more than all the generals in every NATO country combined. So that tells you where the corruption is.
Sources tell Fox News President Trump has stopped shy of ordering the Pentagon to draw up military plans. But the prospect of unilateral military intervention remains high. Bolton says it's a top priority for President Trump.
We talk about it several times a day. He's very interested in this.
The Pentagon confirms U.S. military planes are delivering humanitarian aid to the Colombian border. On Monday, President Trump set to address Venezuelan Americans in Miami. He'll make the case that socialism ultimately drives nations into the ground. Brett?
Jillian, thank you. Up next, the top man at the Pentagon is calling for more international help in the fight against ISIS, especially in Syria. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles has a weather system known as an atmospheric river unleashes heavy rain across California, bringing the threat of mudslides and flooding to a region that has seen days of rain and heavy snow. Floodwaters are raising concerns about structural damage in one community southeast of L.A. Classes in many San Diego County school districts were canceled because of flooding, power outages, and road closures. Fox 28 in Columbus, Ohio, as Planned Parenthood sues the state of Ohio over a law that bans dilation and evacuation abortions, one of the most common abortion methods. Former Governor John Kasich signed a bill last year on the procedure known as DD&E. It is commonly used in second trimester abortions. Similar laws have been rejected by the courts. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from our affiliate Fox 29. One of the big stories there tonight, Pennsylvania's governor says the state's medical marijuana program has helped 83,000 patients cope with various conditions and illnesses in its first year. Approximately 1,000 physicians are now approved to allow patients to access the drug, and more than 14,000 doctors have registered to be a part of that program. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. The compensation fund for victims of the 9/11 attacks is running out of money and will cut future payments by 50 to 70%. Nearly 40,000 people have applied to the federal fund for those with illnesses potentially related to being at the site of 9/11. Nearly $5 billion in benefits have been awarded out of the $7.3 billion fund. Officials say any pending claims will be paid out at 50% of their prior value. Valid claims received after February 1st will be paid at just 30%. The fund is scheduled to stop taking claims in December of next year. The president's acting defense secretary says he foresees growth in the international coalition that is fighting ISIS terrorists in Iraq and Syria. The statement from Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan comes as U.S.-backed forces are trying to eradicate ISIS
region. And we will continue to support our local partners' ability to stand up to the remnants of ISIS.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham went further today, suggesting some U.S. troops could stay in Syria alongside an increased European presence.
General Dunford will be coming to some of you in this room, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and will be asking for a contribution of forces to stabilize the region post-destruction of the caliphate.
Others are preparing too. In Sochi, the leaders of Russia, Turkey and Iran met to discuss the U.S. withdrawal. Iran and Russia say the Syrian government should move in. Turkey said it would.
It is imperative that the withdrawal process is conducted in a way that does not lead to a power vacuum.
Today, General Votel, head of U.S. forces in the Middle East, warned that local forces were not yet able to operate against ISIS without U.S. support, and that he would not recommend a withdrawal. Brett?
Benjamin Hall in London. Benjamin, thanks. Up next, will New York Democrats turn on their Democratic socialist darling over billions in lost investment from Amazon? We'll have that story. First, beyond our borders tonight, Vice President Mike Pence visited the memorial site at Auschwitz today. Pence and presidential advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner saw a train car, crematoriums, and the hair of victims at the Nazi concentration camp in Poland. Vice President Pence is on a 4-day visit to Europe that included meeting with Polish soldiers and American troops in Poland and a conference on the Middle East. Spain's prime minister is calling for an early election, general election for April. It's expected to highlight the deep political divisions coursing through that European Union nation. Spaniards will be going to the polls for the third time in less than 4 years after the minority socialist government lost a budget vote in parliament. Dozens of protesters held a demonstration today in support of a Philippine journalist who has aggressively covered President Rodrigo Duterte's administration. Federal agents served a warrant against Maria Ressa late Wednesday afternoon and escorted her from her office. Government critics are denouncing the move as a threat to media freedom. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. She may be the darling of many progressive Democrats, but freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is taking enormous criticism from some in her own party and her own state for her role in Amazon's decision to cancel plans for a huge investment in New York. Here's correspondent Doug McElway.
Democrats are often called the party of the big tent, but critics say Amazon's decision to bail on a new headquarters in Queens, New York has exposed the party's other reputation as a circular firing squad.
Why in the world would you celebrate driving 25,000 jobs out of Long Island City? I mean, that is just ridiculous.
Amazon said the average salary for those 25,000 new employees would have exceeded $150,000 per year, bringing in an estimated $27.5 billion in tax revenues over the next 25 years. A windfall, especially considering the state only had to give up $3 billion in tax incentives to entice Amazon. But the increasing leftward anti-business tilt of the party helped poison the deal. One Amazon executive told NBC, quote, "If you talk to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it's never Amazon."
What this is a celebration of is that everyday people in the community stood up and they wanted a say in what was happening in their own backyard.
Polls found a majority of New Yorkers supported the deal, despite Amazon's non-union policy, even in this union-rich city.
And see what basically we're left with now. The bombed out cars in our neighborhood. This is not Shangri-La over here. We needed this over here. We needed this.
More traditional Democratic politicians supported it too. Governor Andrew Cuomo fumed, quote, "A small group of politicians put their own narrow political interests above their community."
We wanted to negotiate a better deal. We didn't want to see those on the left, those who are anti-capitalist, completely kill the deal.
It's the latest fissure in a party which is smarting from the controversies of late-term abortion, blackface, and sexual harassment in Virginia, an embarrassing rollout of what some Democrats say is the overly ambitious Green New Deal, and accusations of anti-Semitism within its caucus.
Those controversies are all boxes that President Trump may be checking for later use when his re-election campaign gears up. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Monday, we begin a week-long series examining the Congresswoman's controversial new Green Deal proposal, and we'll look at all the specifics. President Trump may be getting his first challenger for the Republican Party nomination in 2020, as Democrats in Washington are plotting their strategy for the next election cycle. Correspondent Peter Ducey is live tonight with that story. Peter?
Brett, the current president campaigned on a promise to build the wall, and now some Democrats hoping to challenge him next year are thinking out loud about doing the opposite.
If you could, would you take the wall down now? Here. Yes. Like you have a wall.
Absolutely.
Knock it down.
I'd take the wall down.
I could look at it and see which part he means and why, and if it makes sense, I could support it.
Border security should always be a priority for our country. The question is, where do we need to put the resources to make sure that our border is safe?
The headliner at the DNC's winter meeting in Washington today was Stacey Abrams, who just gave the Democratic response to the State of the Union, but spent most of her time on stage today relitigating her unsuccessful gubernatorial campaign in Georgia in the midterms.
Voter suppression is legal in the United States right now. They take legal actions and bastardize them and manipulate them until the rights that they are supposed to protect are no longer visible.
And for the first time this cycle, a Republican has opened up an exploratory committee hoping to challenge President Trump. Former Massachusetts Governor Will Weld, who already popped up in New Hampshire.
Why you, Mr. Weld?
Why you? Well, I've got a boy's regular haircut to start with. I am serious about this.
But Weld faces incredible headwinds in a potential challenge to Trump. For one thing, the RNC has already endorsed the president's re-election campaign. Second of all, the New Hampshire Republican Party chairman has already said that Weld, who endorsed Obama and Clinton, needs to think hard about how welcome he really is in the GOP. Brett.
Peter Ducey at the Democrats' winter meeting. Peter, thanks. Former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick has resolved pending grievances with the National Football League. Kaepernick and former teammate Eric Reid filed collusion grievances against the league, saying they were blacklisted because of protests during the national anthem at games. Kaepernick has not played in the league since 2016. Reid missed 3 games last season before signing with Carolina. The president pulls the trigger on a national emergency declaration to get funding for his border wall. So we're waiting for that news conference out of Illinois. We'll get reaction from the panel on the day's news when we come back. This is a Fox News alert. We are getting ready to hear from authorities in Aurora, Illinois, and that shooting today. President Trump just tweeted about the shooting in Aurora, in which at least 1 person has been killed, 4 police officers wounded. He says, quote, "Great job by law enforcement in Aurora, Illinois. Heartfelt condolences to all of the victims and their families. America is with you." As you look live at the site of the news conference and the scene in Aurora, Illinois, authorities are saying, again, at least 1 person was killed, 4 police officers wounded. The shooter opened fire in an industrial park. The person who was killed, it is very possible, was the shooter, because the police spokesman said the suspect had been, quote, neutralized, did not elaborate on that word, neutralized, but the coroner did arrive soon thereafter this afternoon, and the police officers are said to be in decent condition at the hospital. As you look live among the people there, the Illinois Governor, J.B. Pritzker, there in the suit. We are expecting to hear from authorities to get the latest. Let's take you to Aurora, Illinois.
To be with us this evening. Present, we have Aurora Police Chief Kristen Zeman, His Honor the Governor, His Honor Mayor Richard Irving, Deputy Chief Keith Jackson of the Aurora Police Department, Sheriff Ron Hain from the Kane County Sheriff's Office, Fire Chief Gary Krenitz from the Aurora Fire Department, and a myriad of other people you see wrapped around. I'm going to turn the podium over immediately to Chief Kristen Zeman. She's going to offer a few remarks. So here's Chief Zeman.
Thank you very much. My name is Chief Kristen Zeman. I'm the chief of the Aurora, Illinois Police Department.
At approximately 1:24 today, the Aurora Police Department received multiple calls for an active shooter at 641 Archer Avenue, a manufacturing warehouse. At 1:28, officers arrived and were fired upon immediately. 2 of the initial 4 officers entering the building were shot. Additional officers began to arrive and were also fired upon. A total of 5 officers were struck by gunfire. The other officers on the scene located gunshot victims inside the building. At this time, we have confirmed that 5 victims are deceased. The Aurora Fire Department arrived on scene to stage with medics. A regional law enforcement response was coordinated to include Rescue Task Force, and several teams of officers went inside to locate and engage the offender. The building is 29,000 square feet, and when they located the offender, they engaged in gunfire with him, ultimately killing him. The shooter is identified as Gary Martin. He is a 45-year-old man, and we believe he was an employee of the company. At this time, we aren't sure of the motive of this act of violence. We do not have the identities of the deceased, but we would like family members to know that unification for the victims and witnesses that were in the building will be at Aurora University Public Safety Building located at 1408 South Lawn. All 5 police officers were transported to local hospitals, and from there, 2 were airlifted to Chicago area trauma centers. A 6th officer is being treated for a knee injury. I want to take this opportunity to send positive energy to those officers who are being treated, and to the officers and medics who showed up from all over the state to render aid. This message is for them. Thank you for your selfless act. Thank you for running towards gunfire and putting your lives in danger to protect those inside the business. My heart goes out to the victims and their families who simply went to work today like any other day. We offer our sincere condolences, and as the facts of this tragedy unfold, we will provide information and attempt to make sense of it. I'd like to introduce now our mayor, Richard C. Irvin, to say a few words.
I don't think I can be clear in stating that today is a sad day in the city of Aurora. For so many years, we have seen similar situations throughout our nation, and the horrible feeling that we get when we see it on the news. To experience it firsthand is even more painful. It's a shame that mass shootings such as this have become commonplace in our country. It's a shame that a cold and heartless offender would be so selfish as to think he has the right to take an innocent life. Well, we as society cannot allow these horrific acts to become commonplace. We as a society cannot allow the selfless and heartless acts of this terrible tragedy to be relegated to spots on the 10 o'clock news. We must never forget those innocent people who were senselessly gunned down, the mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. We must never forget those police officers that rose to the call of duty and put themselves in harm's way to protect the innocent, who are also mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. Our hearts go out to the victims in this horrific tragedy. Our prayers to their families during what I'm sure will be a long and painful healing process. But we will heal. We will come together as one community and stand by those in pain from today's great loss. We will stand together with those officers shot in the line of duty. We will come together and heal as one Aurora. Let me commend our heroic first responders, the Aurora Police Department, the Aurora Fire Department, our 911 operators, Kane County Sheriff's Office, and all the FBI, and all the responding public safety teams throughout mutual aid, and who have come from near and far to assist today. They all put their lives on the line to secure the health and safety of others. We sincerely thank you. Thank you to every person who was directly involved in this incident. Your patience and professionalism during this entire process was commendable and allowed the responding officers to get the job done. We're here for you all as well. Thank you to the entire Aurora community for helping us to get the word out and provide accurate information throughout the community. Your support was invaluable. and will continue to be from this point forward. Thank you to the people from throughout the nation who have offered assistance as well. We need your support, and we need your prayers more than ever. On behalf of the entire city of Aurora, remember, we are one community, and we will be stronger than ever past this. At this time, I will introduce our governor, J.B. Pritzker.
I want to begin by acknowledging the amazing work of the Aurora Police Department and Chief Zeman and all of the men and women who were first responders and every single law enforcement officer involved in securing this scene. You rushed toward danger, and in doing that you saved countless lives, and you represent the very best of what it means to protect our communities and to serve our communities. You have our deepest gratitude, and all the resources of the state that you need are at your disposal to continue your work into the evening and in the days ahead. I want to say a special thank you to the FBI, the ATF, Illinois State Police for offering backup, for being here to help the city of Aurora and the police department. There is no way to prepare for the pain of losing innocent people in the state that you were elected to lead, the state that you're elected to protect. There is no way to prepare. There are no words for the kind of evil that robs our neighbors of their hopes, their dreams, and their futures. There are no words to express our gratitude to the families of the officers who were injured in the line of duty as they responded within moments to the gravest kind of danger that they can face. Tomorrow, the families of the victims will be less than whole. They join a group that should not exist and yet continues to grow. This morning, I stood with 1,500 community members in Chicago who are fighting the epidemic of gun violence that continues to ravage so many communities. These are everyday citizens who have been called to action by the loss of a loved one, by witness of violence in their communities, or by the simple desire for change. To the families of the victims here in Aurora, there are no words that I can offer to lessen the pain. But know that our state grieves with you, that MK and I and our family grieves with you. May the memory of those that we lost today be a blessing. And more than that, may their memory fuel our work to bring peace to this state that we call home. And may God bless the brave law enforcement officers who continue to run toward danger. Thank you. Let me turn it over to Deputy Chief Rowley, or Officer Rowley.
Thank you, Governor. Okay, so we will return at 9 p.m. this evening. We will have something with much more substance in terms of the progress of our investigation so far. I hope to have enough to give handouts for everyone and answer questions perhaps at that time, but we're not going to take any questions right now, but we will come back at 9 o'clock. Okay, thank you very much.
You're looking live there in Aurora, Illinois. An update from authorities and the Illinois Governor, J.B. Pritzker. 5 people dead in this shooting today. 5 police officers shot, wounded, but they are recovering, said to be in stable condition. Should get updates on those conditions soon. The gunman was shot and killed in a gun battle with police officers. He's identified as 45-year-old Gary Martin. We don't have a motive. We don't have much more information. They didn't take questions. but that is the latest from Aurora, Illinois. 5 dead, 5 police officers recovering in the hospital from this shooting today. We'll bring you the latest as we get it here on Fox. Meantime, big news out of the White House today about the president declaring a national emergency.
I'm going to be signing a national emergency, and it's been signed many times before. It's been signed by other presidents. There's rarely been a problem. They sign it. Nobody cares. I'll sign the final papers as soon as I get into the Oval Office, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there, and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
Wasn't exactly conjunction junction, what's your function, but it was a little sing-songy there from the president as he laid out the process as he sees it from the Rose Garden. Let's bring in our panel. Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com. We welcome Victor Davis Hanson, fellow at the Hoover Institution, and Jim Messina, former Obama White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Victor, let me start with you. Critics say this is unnecessary and shouldn't be done. The president laid out his justification for doing it. Your thoughts?
I think it's mostly a matter of semantics. I think if he had just said, I have a pen and I have a phone, and the Congress didn't act in a way in the interest of the United States, so there's money in DOD, there's money in Homeland Security, EPA, Department of Interior, and incrementally and gradually he could reallot those funds rather than making it so dramatic. But I think the news cycle is going to go on, and it's not going to be the big psychodrama that everybody thinks.
Jim, to Victor's point, President Obama used the pen and his phone. Past presidents, as far as wall construction, Bill Clinton, 20 miles of fencing. George Bush, 124. Barack Obama, 97 miles. 14 miles in San Diego, 48 miles in the Rio Grande Valley. And Donald Trump wants to keep on building. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think the question is how, right?